And I'll do a quick introduction for Jim. Thank you, Jim. Welcome. Jim Perry is the AVP of Data and Analytics at Safelite Auto Glass. I met Jim because his daughter was going to Miami and he thought he would look into some analytics and data science work or centers that might exist on campus. And he happened to get connected to me, which I think it's been great for us and great conversation starters for us here at the Center for Analytics and Data Science, and have a new partnership and new industry partners to connect with. One of the conversations Jim and I were having, he brought up this idea of treasure map reporting, and it sparked an interest in me because of another session a year ago that we held around data storytelling. And it was actually with alums, and it was before the pandemic hit, so we were all in a space together. And one of the attendees asked the question, how do you get executives to stop asking for reports and to stop asking for dashboards? And what can we do instead of that? And I thought, wow, this is perfect timing. This is great for students before they leave Miami to have a little bit more perspective and thought and ideas for how to combat that. And so when he brought it up, I jumped at the chance to have Jim talk to us about it because he's very passionate about this topic. So I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak in front of you. This is one of my favorite topics, and it is the point in which I spend a significant amount of time talking with my peers, my associates on my team, and really trying to make sure when we deliver content, it's the very best content. And so we're going to run through, I'm a huge fan of doing some demonstrations, and we're going to run through something really quick. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do a little bit of a timer. You'll see the directions, and then you'll see what to do, and then we'll take it from there, okay? At the end, I'm going to flip it off. You'll see me turn my screen off, and then I want you to throw into the comments what you see. So ready for the experiment? Let's give it a go. So presentation 2. What do I mean by treasure map reporting? So here is your task, very simple. Look at the treasure map on this. You have 5 seconds to put into the chat the number of X's you see. Okay, how many X's did you see? Throw it into the chat, everyone. Greater than 12, 6. Yeah, okay, 5, 5, 6. Got it. All right, we're going to redo the experiment, except now we're going to think about the treasure. So this is a metaphor for what I think we do in a lot of reporting that we deliver to executives, right? We essentially give them a map, and we give them everything we could possibly think of, all of the links, all of the connections. Hold on a second, I may have had the wrong presentation 2, okay. We give them everything. So we're gonna redo this experiment, same experiment again, except we're gonna make one little change. You ready? Go. Okay, we're gonna stop the share again. Look at the difference in the answers. So the difference between the first one and the second one was a simple red circle. And what I am encouraging all of you to think about as you're creating content for your leaders or looking at content, right, is there the red circle? Are we doing the right job in thinking about reporting? Now, there's some great questions that I love to see out here. Like, for instance, what does the X mean, right? What's the value of X? So what about X? Which is, in fact, the next level of granularity. But so often, all we want to do is, first of all, show everything just in case. I really want you to see everything just in case, because what I really don't want to do is have to come back and answer another question. So I'm just going to give you everything I can possibly think of. And then the next thing I'm going to do, and this is what happens often when we go from a row and column world to a Tableau world, is we do this and we think we're done in a Tableau or a dashboard world. I've now made it easy to see what the 9 are, but I don't necessarily show you the interconnectivity, the reasons why. I've definitely helped you with the 9, but I have not necessarily answered questions, right? In a real treasure map, this doesn't tell you if there are 9 treasures, because if you look closely, there are treasures up in the right-hand corner, they're here. There's another one here, but there's no treasure map next to it. And so then there's this one in the bottom right-hand corner, right, which looks open and full of treasure, but there's no X next to it. And so when we use this as a metaphor and we think about data, oftentimes we are highlighting things that are of interest, but don't necessarily tell us anything. So let's talk about this instead of treasure map. Let's talk about this in a real example. So I've gone out and I've just pulled some examples from the internet. Where are we? Show all windows. So give me just a second to stop share, close this. Open that up. Okay, here we go. Share. Okay. So we're going to talk about this first example. This first example says COVID-19. Lee looks like she knows who it is. I hope I'm not talking us. I think the point I want to make about this is you are left to guess what this is about. Is it about hospitalizations? Is it about caseload? There isn't anything other than this is COVID-19. I think the other thing that's really interesting is you have this really important spike, but because of the way you've done the time graph here, where you've included all this period in which, what happened to my screen? Where COVID was, my screen just went away. Sorry, did it look like my screen went away to you guys? I think it did.
It's like, you know, thinking. It's got a spinning little.
I don't know why. Maybe I can go back. There we go. Oh, I lost it just as quickly as I had it. Oh, let's try a different one. So, separate from Tableau, this is another one I found out here. So again, when I talk about treasure map reporting, this doesn't really make it easy. It doesn't even put the red circle around. What is going on? I don't know why it's doing that to me. I had this all set up.
Because technology is not our friend, Jim.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Like you can see, I have all of them ready to go.
Yeah, you do. I bet it's a Tableau problem, not a Jim problem.
Oh, I hope not.
Yeah.
This one I really like because there was another page that I wanted to take, which was an example of where they tried to put the circle around, but didn't really exactly do it. So I'm hoping that this comes back up. Otherwise, what I'll do is we'll do this, work links, Tableau. There it is. It's coming along. It's so bizarre. Okay, yeah, okay. So my whole point here is that this is one of those examples where they've given you the treasure map. I think everyone understands it. And you really need to go searching for the -265. You have to scroll. So then this at the top, you see sales report, sales graph, right? So you think, okay, maybe they've given me a graph. Maybe they've made it super easy for me to understand what's going on. So we'll click on the sales graph. You're expecting a graph. I will show you that you're not going to get a graph as this thing calls up. I wonder if my internet is going slow. There we go. No, you get shopping carts. I know. You don't get a graph. You get shopping carts. Now, presumably the shopping carts mean something. And presumably the biggest shopping cart, which is New York City, tells you who had the largest sales owned, but here it's sorted by profitability. So let's go in here and we'll say by sales volume. And it's interesting, so it's sorted by profitability, but it doesn't tell you, there we go. Now I can see that New York was the top, and if I go to this insy-teensy little guy on the bottom, here was the bottom. This is a classic example of what I would call over-engineering Tableau dashboards. You really are trying to do something I would say, cutting edge, but you miss the point of sharing that data, right? Which is to really help you understand who is driving profit and driving sales through the business. And in fact, you've created another treasure map because in order to understand it, I still have to hover over every piece of information I want to see, right? So if we go to another one, let's see, leaderboard, call center. I think this was the one. No, we'll get to that one in a second. Here's another one. So here's another person who I would say has some real Tableau talent. And in fact, they are making good use of colors. They are doing good graph work. It's a hot mess. And the reason it's a hot mess is it contains a number of different subject matter areas, all made small. And your eye, you don't know what you really should be looking at here, right? And so there is a value in segregating your Tableau dashboards, or any other dashboard for that matter, to really be subject matter specific. And if you need to combine subject matters, try and limit that so you're not trying to smash 50 different pieces of information together on one single dashboard. And so while I think that the fact of the matter is, if you'd broken this up into maybe 3 dashboards, it would have been a lot more effective. If you'd harmonized the use of your colors, because it's not quite clear, is dark brown good or is light blue good? And so it's very artistic, but it doesn't really hit the point. So we're going to pause here for a second and say, well, what does it look like, in my opinion anyway, when someone really does nail it? And so we're going to go to this report. So this report is a call center leaderboard report. It does contain some information, obviously, but what it has done is, and this is the same thing I recommend for those of you who have resumes, it's brought the most important things to the top. How are we closing tickets? How many do we have open? And you can see the critical tickets at 14. Who by name is doing best? Who's opening tickets? And even the average wait time by day and hour. It's not really hard to see Wednesday at 6 p.m. That's your worst time. So there's a question to be had here that in my ideal world, when I hover over this, I wouldn't see not only the total tickets, but I would see who opened those tickets and who was working at that time. So it is one small miss of opportunity, because the question really is, so we got 7 tickets at Wednesday, but this is really an average wait time. So 7 is great, but it doesn't necessarily tell me, for instance, why they waited so long. And so part of me actually looks at this and goes, is this an average wait time? Or are you just telling me the number of tickets that were open? And am I really missing a denominator, which was the total tickets that came in? So it's really, really close, with a little tweaking of the hover over, things that I would want to be able to share with my leadership to answer the next question is, you get to the right question. Why is Wednesday at 6 so busy? It's a great question. But it misses just a little bit on explaining why Wednesday at 6 is busy. It just tells you it is. And that is a classic example where we, as data and analytics folks, we're putting the treasure map out, and we're not trying to really anticipate when they use this, what question will our leaders, our business partners ask?
So Jim, I have a question for you related to sort of this dashboard, and it might be something that's helpful for some of the students on this call to think about, because they're going into their first career, right? And their first job when they graduate. And you're showing some, like, this is a really nice visual, and totally understand. And I would have had the same questions that you did, and looking at this and thinking about how to build on it and make it better. Well, the question that I would lean to, which I think you kind of answered just in your last comment, is how do you get started? Where do you start, right? Because it's very easy to get paralyzed by this notion of, I want my report, I want my dashboard to answer all the questions that somebody's going to have. And then you kind of then you do too much. And then you don't even really get started, because you can't figure out where to start, and you're so consumed by, I want it to be perfect, versus I need something that's going to be good on the way to great. as my first, like my beta version. So can you, maybe you're planning to talk about that?
No, so I can absolutely talk about that. I think that there's always a strategy with this, right? So there's two types of scenarios you really face. The first is you face, and we'll deal with this one first, where someone comes into you and says, "This is my report, make it in Tableau," right? And they believe that some sort of magic happens when you put it into Tableau. So the first thing you'll notice is those reports, when they say put it in Tableau, they tend to look like this sales report with all the rows and all the columns, and they assume that somehow this will be perfect. The very first thing you need to ask is, and it seems so basic, but when you get this data, what do you do with it? What decisions are you hanging off of it? Where are you going to go to next? And many reports end up being what I would call compass reports. So it's not exactly where you give them the X and you do the circles and you're like, the answer is 9. But many reports end up being something that should point you to the next direction. So as I walk through building something like this out, I would start by saying, do you really need to see all products? Just like, first of all, what can I cut? How can I think about this? Is it important to see all products? And if so, why do you need to see all products? Or is it that the team of 20 people as individuals consume 5 products because they're responsible for it, and another 5 products? And so if I add a filter by person, I can actually bring this way down in terms of content level and make it focused. The second is you will see that your business partners don't always understand the tool that you're using to deliver to them. So I don't want to make this necessarily just a Tableau function, but in many instances, all of this is brought to the front because there is no hover over. There is no ability to ask the next level of questions beneath it. And so saying, if I just gave you a summary of the top 5, bottom 5 producing items and an average product, what would that lead you to believe next? And that really is the key point, is what is next as you run through this. So the next thing is that I try and keep on a main dashboard no more than 3 to 5 dissimilar metrics. So basically, I know that there is a relationship between them. So we look at Net Promoter Score often. The other thing we look at is what we call time to serve. So at Safelite, if you break your windshield on Saturday, how long does it take to fix your windshield? We know normally when time to serve starts to get higher, 6, 7, 8 days, that does negatively impact your NPS score. So we like to commingle those two things because one piece of information helps you understand the next piece of information. But when you get to something that looks like this, you've lost it, right? So asking, we're going through this process with our field dashboard, and we started arbitrarily with a number of 6. You can't have more than 6 metrics, and they need to be correlated in some way. So that was the first challenge, was to get the business comfortable that there would be other places for content, and that this was always going to be your compass, your direction. It may not answer all of your questions, but it certainly would get you to the next level. The next thing that I would say is really, really important, and is something that is not often thought about, is making sure that when you think about filters and when you think about the data you have, I'm willing to bet you all of this data sits at different level of time dimensions. Maybe it's updated weekly, maybe it's updated daily. And so you never want one piece of your board to be stale and not change for 7 days, while another is hourly, right? And if you do have to have that and your stale data is a budget number, then you're showing some sort of thermostat or thermometer showing how close you get, right? That's okay, because you're going there looking at against a goal. So budget numbers I get less concerned about. But then there are other times we've told our business partners there was one number that they wanted to put on because they're like, it's super important and the field needs to hit this 30-day target. And I was like, can I ask you a question? If they go in every day, they're going to see the same number every day for 30 days. And he said, yep. I said, do you really think past, I'm going to say day 4, they don't know what their number is? And then he was like, well, no, they'll know what their number is. I'm like, so we're just like, are we just being mean? Like, we're just like, this is your number, this is your number. Or is there a different way to solve that particular problem while not, I would say, polluting the dashboard with something that is stagnant and doesn't tell you anything? So really removing what I would call non-information from that dashboard, or something that is inherent to their operations. I mean, you're talking about regional vice presidents who have 200 people reporting to them. They know their numbers, they know their business. And that's really an important thing to think about as we go through this process. And so being willing to push back on your partner and challenge that status quo of when they try and commingle different data that doesn't fit or isn't related, or data that's stagnant. Those are very, very important things. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you answered it very well. Thank you.
Okay. I think the other thing that I want to touch on is around content of reporting. So I think, as you saw, as I moved through the various reports, we'll get to this one. I like pieces and parts of this one. The thing I want you to notice as I move through all of them quickly, they are all different. So as you think about your organization and you think about a strategy of deployment in your organization, I keep coaching to my team, we are the newspaper. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever subscribed to a newspaper or ever subscribed to a web page, there is a consistency in the delivery, not only of the newspaper, but also the order in which content is delivered, right? So you don't genuinely see them put the sports page and commingle obituaries in the middle of it. Too often what I see is we have very creative individuals who, like this individual, over content, and I'll go here and I'll show you a topic of consistency. Our goal is to try and create that newspaper so that regardless of who creates a dashboard, when I give it to someone and they've never seen it before, there is a familiarity to it where they don't need to relearn what things mean. So your business should not need to relearn what colors mean to you. They should not need to relearn how we read bar charts. They should not need to relearn phrases or words, so don't change them in between. And that is very, very important, because I think, I'll give you an example. My field partners today get 75 different reports. And I can promise you, if I were to flash them up one after another, they won't look the same. And so each and every report has a different look. It might be in a PDF, it might be in Excel, might be in PowerPoint, uses different words, different colors, sometimes the different words for the same meaning. A week. And so when I think about that, this is an example you're going to see here. This is a lovely example of Net Promoter Score. Very simple, good use of white space. Only small improvements that I can think of is where you have this bar chart, the category, it defines, oh, son of a gun. It defines the colors. You saw the red, yellow, and green there. I'll come back in a second. That red, yellow, and green should be over and closer to the bar chart as it was. I wonder if I don't know, there we go. So in that, this piece here, this category, should be closer to the area in which it is speaking of, because you see they've used 3 different types of red, yellow, and greens, like a dark one and a light one. And you're really leaving it to the interpreter to figure out which one belongs with which. So first of all, get it over. The first thing I would tell you is get it over there. The second thing is, and this really goes back to the consistency, is you can see here the number of answers is down here, this bar that goes from 109 to 7,000. And that really is back up in here. So it's quite clear Kappa has the highest number of records. Again, I've removed sort of the key and put it off to the right, which is okay. Where I look at it and it becomes important for digestion is if I flip to the next page and they're both about NPS. Take a second. For whatever reason, they put the number of records at the top. And so I look at that, and while it might not be that big of a deal, it actually is when you're not talking about NPS next time. When you want to say a number of records is from light blue to dark blue, but it's some other subject matter area, it's best to try and keep a familiarity not only in position, but in coloring as you go through this. And so in this instance, there's colors down here that aren't even referenced. So I don't know if it draws your eye in, and I can hover over it and I can see that has 9,000 records and that has 39. So I assume that the dark blue means something, but in fact, there's no missing key. So this is, again, when I go back to how I'm decomposing this, we really want to make any report that we provide, and it's really a design level thinking. I think the thing that is really challenging data and analytics team is that you really need to have someone who has user interface experience, UI experience on your team. I don't currently, but I will tell you one of my long-term goals as we really ramp up is in fact to get someone who can help bring the user interface thinking, because your typical data person says bar chart, numbers on the top, good, and isn't really thinking about that last mile. I'm going to stop. Questions?
Does anyone have any questions? And Jim, you're frozen. And thankfully you're frozen in such a way that I think everyone else sees that Jim's face is frozen, but it's not in an awkward way. So that's good for you, Jim.
Awesome.
We can still hear you though, so that's a good thing.
I'm going to stop my share for a second. Maybe that will fix it.
That might help too. But are there any questions from anyone else on the call right now? I can come up with my own, but I'll leave it for the audience first.
Close that down. Oh, great.
Having more issues there? All right, no one is speaking up, so I assume that there are no questions in the audience just yet. One question that I might have for you, just maybe some words of wisdom or advice that you can provide to the students on this notion where, like, I really resonated when the question you would ask is, how do you plan to use this data? What are you going to use this information for? If I'm going to provide you this dashboard, this report, did we lose Jim? Okay, we lost Jim. I'm sure he'll join back. So I will hold my question then until Jim rejoins us. I have to tell you guys, this actually makes me feel real good about myself right now that Jim's having all these issues, because usually it's just me. So makes me pretty proud of myself at this point. Well, I will tell you that based on my experiences when I was at 8451, everything that Jim has been walking us through and talking to us about is the same way that I was approaching a lot of the reporting that we would do. We would provide a report for Kroger. It was 50, 60 pages long and was not used very often. So thankfully there were a lot of advocates in the organization, make sure we were pairing up with, I thought I would just start taking over for you a little bit, Jim, giving some of my experiences. And we ended up being able to change that report down to a 3-page infographic versus a 50 to 60 page slide deck of information that they said they needed and wanted, and nothing was ever done with it. So and really help to drive their business on the key metrics that they could make decisions off of. So I was just telling everyone, Jim, that the way that you've outlined and talked about and thinking about reporting, and how you ask the questions of what will you do with this information if you have it? What decisions will you make? What actions might you take? What would you do differently? It's exactly how we would try to coach our team of analysts and data scientists to think about some of these problems. So I'll turn it back over to you. That was my question for you, and then I just answered it myself.
I think the other thing is that there's a lot of try and fail, right? And so
Yes.
I rarely see new reporting where you're really trying to go greenfield, just hit the mark on the very first shot. My take is that in all honesty, in the field reporting dashboard that we're working on, and I would show you, except there's parts of it that I'm not quite comfortable with yet. The very first rendition, we had a strong technical Tableau resource, but that resource didn't have any design thinking. And so that person ended up really building what our partner wanted. And so it took a little bit for me to convince everyone that while that was good, it just wasn't what we needed.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things as you were talking, and you're showing all the different dashboards that just out in Tableau Public that anyone can go out and look through themselves. A lot of reporting is also very like personal, right? This is how I like it to look. And that it is very important to make sure you get the end user as a part of the design phases and user acceptance testing to ensure that the products will meet their needs.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, we always go through a user acceptance testing, and the fact of the matter is having a good, in the old days you could build a report, and there was only so many ways you could build it. And when I look at Tableau, the upside to Tableau is it's like a paintbrush with a million colors and every brush you could ever imagine, which is fantastic. At the same token, that limitless capability means that you tend to not be able to produce the newspaper because everyone's got their own colors, flavors. And the other thing is that there's always this subjectivity to it. So the better way to go is to try, we're working on creating templates for ourselves and standards that say this is where the filters go. These are the colors you use. We're also trying to define when you have different types of data, do those go in a bar chart? Do they go in a line chart? And so when I showed you the NPS and those bar charts, the NPS works best in a bar chart like type way. So we're looking at that and trying to look at metrics and say the best way to consume this metric, if you have to do a graph on it, is using this kind of template or methodology. And my internet is just not going to cooperate today. I had something else I wanted to show you, but we'll have to pass because it's just not going to be reliable.
That's okay. Another thing that you and I had talked about was advice on resumes and
Sure.
thinking through some of the, we're getting very close to some career fairs. I know there's a tech fair next week. If there is some advice that you can provide to students on the phrasing of things on their resume, the way they structure them, especially when you're talking about technical fields, that would be incredibly helpful as we're preparing for next week.
Sure. So some of this I think you've probably heard before, but as I look at technical resumes, I look at technical resumes with an eye of data and analytics, right? Which is to say, I'm really interested in what you've done, I'm interested in numbers, and I'm interested in capabilities. So what I see often is that students create treasure maps. It is not uncommon that I get to page 2 and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at what they're capable of doing. And the other thing that I see, particularly with new students, is that they use ambiguous phrases. So one of the things I try and coach my team, and I coach anyone who I have an opportunity to review their resume, is to control the pen. So I love interaction, so we're going to do this again. So if you could go into the chat, and if I were to tell you I have some apples, I'd like you to go into the chat and tell me how many apples you think I have based on the word some. 3, 4, 3. All right, not bad. Ooh, 10. Thank you, Yao. A few. I love Peter. So why do I bring this up? I bring this up because it's pretty common that people bring their anxiety to their resume. And so they might know Python, for example, but maybe they're not the ultimate Python developer with 5 years. So maybe they have a year of experience. And instead of saying a year of experience, which could lead to a healthy conversation, they will say some Python. And I will look at that and go, some Python means what? Like, does it mean a year? If we're talking about how you answered apples, that some Python means 10 years of experience, right? And that's not really the case. And so what I encourage people to do, not only in resumes, but also when you communicate via dashboards or reports or you're answering questions, and it's tempting, right? Because there's always, you're not speaking face to face and you can't always answer questions. And so you don't want to perceived as certainty or not, but they'll put the word some in there, and I coach remove the word some. And they will say, well, they'll assume that the Python experience I have is what they need. And I said, why? I would just ask you, you have Python experience, tell me about that. And now you've opened a door for a dialogue, and you can let the interviewer really explore whether that experience is what they're looking for or not. But if you put some, you're going to essentially put the control of the pen of interpreting your capabilities into a person reading a PDF in which you have no control over that interpretation at all. And you just really don't want to do that, right? You want, and just to be clear, I'm not saying lie. I'm not saying falsify anything. I'm just saying don't open a door for an interpretation different than the one you want. And when you get into that interview, believe me that you will have questions from any technical leader like myself who will ask you what that means. But I will tell you, when I see some, a few, basic, basic is another, oh, I see basic knowledge of Excel. Okay, I don't know what that means. Does that mean you've opened it before and done 1 + 1? Like, what does that mean? These are words you need to get out of your resume. They're bad words for your resume. If you have experience with Excel, say you have experience with Excel. Now, if you see in the job description, they say, I need 7 years of Excel experience. And let's say you have 1, put 1, it's okay. You're not actually going to try and get a job with 1 year of experience that has 7. You may decide to apply, but in that case, be specific and control the pen. And it really is a fundamental that I see as I look at resumes. So the first coaching I have is get rid of ambiguous. If you can't show it to a group of 4 or 5 people and get the same answer, it shouldn't be on there. Remove it. I think the next thing that I see is that they don't put the most important content at the top of the resume. So as people are going through this, often what I see is related job experience sits beneath personal goals, educational classes, classes, and then somewhere at the bottom might be an educational experience that they had, where down there way at the bottom is the most important thing for their capabilities. And so when you're thinking about the role that you're applying for, if you think that there is a job that has related capabilities where it's easy to understand, because I did A, I can therefore do B, bring that farther to the top. We get really, really hung up on what I would say the progression of a career over 15 years. And so at least, in my case, well, it's longer than 15 years. But for college students, your career journey is relatively short. Do not be afraid to bring the most relevant career piece to the forefront, right? And some people are like, well, then it's out of order. That was the second or third job I had. I said, I know, but it's the most important job for the job you're applying for. Why? It goes back to the treasure map. Why hide it? I think the other thing that's interesting is I see non-related content. So I read this one resume that was like fluent in Spanish, some French. And I was like, you're applying for data science jobs, right? Yes. Are you applying at a company that works with customers or is a French or Spanish company? No. Okay, like put it way, way down at the very bottom. Don't leave that on the very top. And I don't mean to say learning a second or a third language isn't impressive. Absolutely is. But you really want to reorganize your resume at any given point to speak to that. Now, I'm going to call an audible here because I see Lindsay, who's a partner of mine in HR, on the line. And Lindsay sees thousands of resumes. Lindsay, are you out there?
I am. Hi.
So
Hi.
Lindsay is a fantastic HR partner, and I think she probably sees 10 times more resumes than I do from undergraduates. Did I miss anything, or do you have any other color to add to students here?
No, you hit the big things, Jim. I think you did a lovely job.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Is there any other thing that maybe catches your eye that you've seen from when you're looking at either intern roles or roles of seniors coming out of college that you've seen really, really effective?
I think you've hit the big ones. If it's not relevant to the job that you're applying, put it further down on the resume. And I love the idea of taking off some. I think you've really hit everything, Jim. You did a nice job.
Oh, thank you, Lindsay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I think that's what I came here to do. I want to show you one last thing, and I can send this out to you guys. These are sort of the tips and tricks that I use as I think about Treasure Map. You see tips, right? Thumbs up, excellent. So a lot of this is just asking yourself these questions. Am I creating a work of art? That's really just about, is it too many colors and too much information, and it's beautiful. And it really, like, put it in the Smithsonian, but it doesn't really answer the question.
If you could share this with me, that would be great,
absolutely.
and I can send it out to the students.
Absolutely.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you. I love this.
Yep.
I will do one last call. Does anyone else have any questions for Jim while we have him?
I will, I'll just throw it out there because you guys were on the call. If you ever want me to take a peek at your resume, I have no problem setting up 30 minutes looking at your resume and helping you in any way I can with that. So if you're on the call and you're here, if you're not on the call, you missed it. But if you're on the call, send me a resume if you want me to look at it. Happy to get on a quick Zoom for 30 minutes and tweak it and show you the things that catch my eye.
One question, Jim, because given some of the students who are on this call and conversations I've had with them, I know you are located in Columbus.
Yeah.
Are majority of your open roles, should you have them, for Columbus, or are you other markets as well?
Columbus is our home office, and we are currently 100% remote. So we do have some associates that I think we've hired in other states who are working remotely. I do believe at some point we are anticipating a return to work scenario. Exactly how that looks is, I think, still to be defined. There are lots of jobs, not only that exist within Safelite, because Safelite really is building out its analytic practice, and not only just reporting to me, but us actually in the business. There are some good marketing jobs. I think HR team is looking for some help doing some analytics. But also when you go out there, it's very clear when you go and look for jobs, there's some that are now fully remote. I think more and more where you live is actually, and where you work, don't necessarily have to align if you're in the same time zone. And even if you're off by an hour, if you're an early riser, you might be okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
My pleasure. All right, gang.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. Really appreciate this.
My pleasure.
We'll be probably editing some of the recordings down, and then we will be sharing it out with all the students.
Yeah,
We
get rid of all my ums. That's what Skylar does when she records me. She gets rid of my ums and my like pauses and the parts where I drop off the Zoom. If you could cut that out as well.
We'll try to cut that out. When we say, Jim, are you there? Jim?
That would be awesome.
I'll make Skylar do it. Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.
Everyone have a great weekend and reach out if you have any other questions, okay? Thank you. Bye.